Well,
sorry, I'm sorry.
ladies and yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, great. Hello and welcome. Hello. I'm over, even though it says Kekin behind me, I'm actually at the Peninsula right now in Beverly Hills, fancy place, but we're having some FDA discussions here, believe it or not. Anyway, but it's great to introduce my friend and hopefully shortly yours. So Francesco has had his ticket punched pretty much everywhere. I'm sure you're going to see this. He's a neuroscientist and is on an extraordinary trajectory. He's partnered with neurosurgeons and other clinicians now to, I think, take the field of neuromodulation, kind of both external. You've heard works that we've done now with external neuromodulation, everywhere from brain-computer interfaces to other types of neuromodulatory systems, to now internal systems that we think may have significant promise in maybe what we would call re-gifting the gift of pain. We'll see where all this goes, but I think I couldn't be more excited to hear about all of this and to hear about what the future holds in this area. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Francesco this morning. And buonasera.
Grazie, David. Buongiorno. Good morning.
Buongiorno. Yeah.
And thanks, Bijan, for the fantastic introduction about the organization. For me, what you guys are doing is very, very cool. Beyond the clinical activities and the research activities that we've discussed in other locations, but these putting together the industry, the research, I think is very, very valuable, very, very important for pushing industry to really arriving to giving technology, products, innovation to the patients. Because research and industry, they have their own shortcomings. And so when you put them together, the story changes a little bit. Now, I understand well that the format is that I share my screen and I start sharing my experience.
Yes, please.
Share whatever you want, man. Just go for it. It's almost impossible to overshare with Bijan around.
All right. So let me focus a little bit what David just said about us taking a step forward for neuromodulation. Eventually, we're dedicating our mission to the 400,000 amputations that we count happen every year because of complications of diabetic neuropathy. And while this number alone leaves me a little bit without breath, honestly, in 2025, this becomes even more complex to digest when you think that after an amputation, those patients stop living. And so in 280,000 of the cases, so 70% of the cases, they die after 5 years. So those are the numbers that we want to bring down at Sensarts. I'm presenting, and I'm Francesco, but together with me, there is also Guy Siman, which is the other co-founder of Sensarts. So whenever you feel that I'm not giving a satisfying response to whatever it is your concern, please feel free to engage also Guy in the conversation. Well, let me develop a little bit more about diabetic neuropathy. I feel that the audience is pretty much aware of what diabetic
sorry,
neuropathy
Francesco, just a comment. I mean, I forgot, I'm guessing I'm communicating with you, but we are recording this talk. Is it okay with you? And it's now live streaming on LinkedIn as well. I would like to ensure that it's okay.
That's great. So more people can hear about that.
Yes. Thanks.
All right. So since there are also other people that may not know exactly everything about what I'm about to talk about, let me also say a couple of words about diabetic neuropathy. Well, diabetic neuropathy consists in the loss of the functionality of the nerves in our legs. And the patients, because of that, are left with not feeling their feet anymore. They do not feel their feet anymore. It's like it's not their part of the body anymore. Now, imagine a life where you have your feet inside the shoes and you don't feel them. You happen to walk, you bend the foot a little bit. So now what you do is that you start putting a lot of pressure over just a limited portion of the foot instead of distributing all the pressure over the entire foot. You repeat that, you repeat that, you repeat that during walking. The final result is that you start breaking the foot. And they do not feel that because, again, they do not have the sensations. So these patients are left with a 100 times higher risk to develop a foot ulceration, with the ulceration being extremely costly for the healthcare system, both in Europe and in the United States, between 30 and 50,000 per ulceration, with the ulceration being the leading cause of amputation worldwide. 25% of the feet ulcer become an amputation. And then I mentioned already before that in 70% of the cases, after 5 years, those patients die. The amputation is also extremely costly, $90,000 in the first 2 years from the amputation, between the surgery per se and the rehabilitation that starts right after the amputation. Also, these patients not feeling their feet anymore are left with other complications, which are an increased risk of falling and also pain. Why do I mention pain? Because in 70% of the cases, this pain due to nerve damage does not respond to available medication. So the enemy here that we need to fight is the loss of sensations from the feet. And at SenseArts, what we do is really to fight this enemy by restoring the natural sensations from the feet. How do we do that? We've invented and developed a novel way to stimulate the sciatic nerve, which is the nerve that is responsible for the exchange of information between the feet and the brain. We implant tiny microwires as thin as hair in the sciatic nerve in the mid-level of the thigh. And through these electrodes, we cover the entirety of the nerve and we restore natural communication with the brain so that the person feels the sensations. But how do we connect the sensations through the stimulation with the feet? Well, we add sensory insoles under the feet of the patients. These insoles register information of touch and movement, and this information is delivered via Bluetooth and in real time to the portion of the nerve that is implanted. Now, let me describe this in a couple different words. Basically, what we do is bypassing the neuropathy. Why? Because the neuropathy in the majority of the cases arrive to the level of the knee. So what we do is that we pick up the information below the neuropathy, so below the foot, and then we send this information to the portion of the nerve in the mid-level of the thigh that is still functioning. So we are a bypass. If you understand that, you understand that our product can work for a person that has that portion of the body below the knee that is not functioning, or that does not have that portion of the body at all. Now, together with the implantable portion of the device, since we're collecting the information from the insoles, what we do is that we've also developed additional elements for improving the experience of the patient and the clinician. The patient has a patient app through which they can control the activation of the therapy whenever they need and want. And the clinician app is a tool that gives access to what we call the gait analysis tool, which is one of the reasons why I want to talk to you guys. With the gait analysis tool, what we do is that we give an assessment on whether the therapy is providing the benefit that we're expecting, which is now a physiological walking again. The person is aware of the restored pressure from the bottom of the foot, so they're always able to regulate the pressure during walking. And if that does not happen, then the patient and the clinician are informed so that the clinician can now change the parameters of stimulation to improve the effectiveness of the therapy. Once the implantation is completed, the clinician uses the clinical app, the clinician app, also for customizing the therapy on the need of the patient. What does this mean? That we characterize how the patient responds to the stimulation. So we deliver gentle current through all the channels of stimulation that are implanted. And in this way, we generate a map of the response of the patient to the stimulation. In this way, we know what channel of stimulation elicits a sensation in the specific portion of the foot. And then to have the product working, we connect the active site that delivers an information of sensation from where the sensors are localized in the sensory insole. Now, this is not science fiction. That's the good news. We've already tested these. We made a proof of concept. We've done 40 animals and 7 humans. And what we've demonstrated? Well, we've demonstrated in animals that we can place these novel electrodes transversally inside the nerve, and we maintain the health of the nerve. In particular, we compared the number of fibers proximally and distally to the level of the implantation, as well as we compared the number of fibers in the nerve before and after the implantation in time, and we saw that the number of fibers did not change, showing that the health of the nerve was maintained. Also, we've demonstrated that the therapy, thanks to this novel implantation, can be stable and reliable. Why? There is, as always, when you implant something inside the body, a fibrotic reaction, a body reaction, because the body does not always want to have stuff from outside placed inside the body. But what we notice is that after just 4 weeks, the fibrotic reaction that has been growing until 4 weeks stabilizes and eventually also reduces a little bit. This means that the parameters of stimulation that we set after 4 weeks from the implantation remain the same for the duration of the use of the therapy, which is fantastic. Now, this is one of the most important results that we've demonstrated. We've demonstrated that in all the patients, we were able to restore natural sensations from all the different spots of the foot, meaning that now we can use the therapy and really give back during walking a rich information from everywhere from the bottom of the foot so that the patient can really go back to the situation before the neuropathy, before losing the sensations. And now I want to show you a few videos where I show you how this sensory restoration ability is transduced into an integration in the use of the prosthesis. In particular, we've demonstrated in the video that you're about to show that the person, thanks to our product, connected to a prosthetic device from which we would agree that the person does not have any remaining sensation, clearly, because the device is not part of the body. Now, the person is able to recognize when an experimenter is touching the prosthetic foot. This was the case in which the foot was not touched, and now you're seeing the foot is touched, and the person is saying, I feel this one. And then it goes over again. I feel this one, really indicating the portion of the foot that was being touched. And we compared the ability of now recognizing the touches from the bottom of the foot with doing it with no sensation restored thanks to our product. And we find an improvement clearly in the ability to recognize the touch areas of 176%. But in another video, I want to show you that even when we detach the prosthesis from the body, the person is still able to recognize what the prosthesis is doing. In particular, in this video, I'm going to show you that the person is able to distinguish different level of flexion of the prosthesis. And you see that the person, when the prosthesis does not move, says there's nothing going on. And when the prosthesis moves a little bit, he gives the feedback of the prosthesis being inclined a little bit, flexed a little bit. If he flexes a little bit more, now the prosthesis, the person indicates that the prosthesis is moving a bit more, and so on and so forth. When you have the prosthesis in action, the person now recuperates the confidence from the feet, because now the person really feels the feet. Imagine you need to walk and you do not know what your feet are doing. You spend all your attention all the time looking at your feet, because where am I going? What am I doing? So if you need to speak with the person that is walking together with you, then at the point it gets complicated to pay attention to the other person. And in here, I'm going to show you that the person increases, because of this, the velocity of walking of 30%. And then again, thanks to this mechanism, now the person is able to recognize whether while walking there is an obstacle from the bottom of the feet, and so eventually prevent a fall event. I'm about to show you a person walking on a runaway where there are obstacles, and here, boom, the person, after having stepped on an obstacle, has fallen on the support for the walk. In the same other case, after having stepped on an obstacle, the person feels it and so counterbalances a little bit the way of walking and so does not rely on falling on the support. What's very interesting is that we've also demonstrated in all the patients that were affected by pain in our experimentation that these patients were able to feel a reduction in the pain that was due to the fact that they had a nerve that was cut, which is called phantom limb pain in their case. By the industry, responder means a decrease of pain of 50%, but eventually, on average, the decreased pain was 73%. We've also demonstrated with what they're called embodiment experiments that the patients now, thanks to the restoration of sensations, feel the prosthesis as part of their body. And now I want to leave you directly with the testimonial of the patients that have tried this before. But before doing this, I want to clarify so that nobody gets lost that the reason why our adventure started with amputees is because in the case of amputees, we had the regulatory barriers that were a little lower, and we were the first ones really in the world to implant electrodes transversally inside the body. So this was a very novel approach. So we needed the regulatory barriers to be low so that we could try this novel approach. And also, and I mentioned this before already, in these patients, you cannot come to me and say, well, but these patients are still feeling some sensation, so your product is working because of that. Well, no, in the case of an amputee, I think that we agree on the fact that the person does not feel any sensation from the prosthesis. And now I leave you to the testimonial of one of the patients.
Touching my tongue or heel or foot anywhere. So I feel every time I feel where is he touching the rubber foot. It was very interesting, like my own leg. First time I feel my leg, I feel my foot. You don't need the concentration to walk. You don't need to look where is your leg. It's much easier to walk when you feel where your foot is, where your knee is. So you don't need any practice. Touching my.
Now, I was recently at a workshop where there was a lot of discussion about neuromodulation involved. And of course, one of the questions was, but why can't you do this with another neuromodulation system? Well, the explanation is simple and easy and very much connected to how our nervous system works and neuromodulation works. With neuromodulation, what you do is that you deliver electrical current, and so you activate the fibers that are in proximity of the nerve of the electrode. If you have a structure that is placed outside, for example, the spinal cord or outside the nerve, it is very complicated to reach the areas of the nerve or the spinal cord that are far away from the stimulator. So what you need to do to arriving over there with the current is that you need to increase the amount of current that is delivered. But now if you start doing that, it's very complicated to activate only some fibers. You basically activate the entire nerve, generating unwanted side effects for the patients. For example, pain when that is not needed, or a sensation when that is not needed. With that approach, which is implanted transversally inside the nerve, an array of microelectrode, we get always in proximity of the fibers that we need to stimulate, so we activate only the fibers that we need to stimulate and not the others. What is the result? Well, here I'm showing you the performance that you can achieve in restoring sensation with different tools that are available today. And you will see that while other tools cover the foot only in 30 or 40% of the cases, plus they do not elicit natural sensations, but rather paresthesia, which is a tingling sensation similar to receiving an electric little shock wherever that sensation is being elicited. In our case, as I showed you before, we cover 100% of the foot and the calf eventually with natural sensations. Now, a little bit about the impact of our product. We count every year in Europe and in the United States 1.7 million patients that, because of diabetic neuropathy, lose sensations from their feet, and so they are at the risk of ulceration, amputation, falls, and pain. Our target are the patients that already have a history of ulceration. Why? Because these patients know that in 1 year, they have a 40% chance of getting another ulceration. In 25% of the cases, they can go for an amputation. And then once they are into the path of amputation, in 70% of the cases, in 5 years, there is dying. So these patients are willing and aware of the fact that they may need to do something in order to avoid this catastrophic future. We've also demonstrated very interestingly that our product is gonna bring a great advantage also to the payers. So the insurances, the Medicare, the Medicaid, they're gonna save after 5 years from the adoption of our product compared to the standard of care, 66,000. They're gonna remake the investment in only 2.5 years from the initial investment. The team that is working with me, well, Guy Seaman I mentioned before. Guy Seaman has a fantastic experience. He was formerly in neuromodulation companies, in diabetic companies, so he's very familiar with all of the things that we're talking about. Additionally, he led teams all the way from inception of a startup adventure until approval for commercialization. And then we have Dan and Maggie, which also have quite a long experience in the active implantable medical device field, in particular covering the clinical, quality, and regulatory aspects. We have also the support of some top-notch experts in everything that are supporting the company. We have a lead surgeon that has implanted 10,000 stimulators in his career. We have C-level and VP level from companies that are commercializing neurostimulators today. And then David mentioned before that he's joining us a little bit, helping us when he can in the pathway towards arriving to give a benefit for the patients with diabetic neuropathy and risk of ulceration and amputation. The company has done quite a few things overall. I clearly spoken to you about the proof of concept that we've done in humans already, which is being published in peer-reviewed medical journals, including some of the most prestigious publications, such as Nature and Science. We've received the breakthrough device designation from the FDA. We've also converted the proof of concept device into a more commercial product. And the reason we did that was because in the proof of concept device, we had a surgery that was lasting, pending the ability of the surgeon, between 5 and 8 hours. With our additional development on the hardware, we enable now the product to be implanted in 1 hour, 1.5 hours end-to-end. And we've demonstrated this with a vet team and with 3 different surgical teams, one of which in the United States on a cadaver study. And they were receiving a training of only 5 to 10 minutes, just the time to explain how the procedure was supposed to move along. We also collected quite some recognition in terms of funding, grants. I've been the coordinator of 5, 6 grants by now in my career leading Sense Arts. And we've received also some initial private investments for a total of $500,000. Our plan is to go back into patients with the commercial product by 2027, so to be ready for a pivotal study for arriving to approval for commercialization. Our lead idea is the FDA approval commercialization in the United States, but we're gonna target, because active implantable medical devices, class 3 medical devices are similar, also Europe. And then in 2030, we wanna be commercial. The reason why I engaged in this initiative and I'm presenting today is because I think that there can be really a great synergy on improving our gait analysis tool. The gait analysis tool, to refresh the memory after this 20-25 minutes presentation, is that tool that is given to the clinician for predicting through machine learning or artificial intelligence whether the customization of the therapy on the patient is really providing benefits in terms of walking. And if that is not the case, so if the gait analysis tool assesses that this is not happening, then the parameters of stimulation are changed again from the clinician. Clearly, we need to do clinical studies. We need to do a pilot study and also a pivotal study. So it would be fantastic to start engaging with centers in the United States to enroll some few patients to start showing in that continent how intraneural stimulation can do good for patients and also for joint grant proposals. I want to leave you with David, and you know, accuse me, blame me if this is not what you thought when you were talking to me the first time that we talked. David is super enthusiastic. He's always super enthusiastic, right? You guys know him. But when he heard about Sensors, I remained like, oh wow. He said, Francesco, this can really do something. Let's see where this goes. He said this can be a game changer. We also believe that this can be a game changer. We are the only ones, honestly, that are offering the solution for restoring sensation to the feet of patients. So to enable patients with diabetic neuropathy to go back to the condition before the diabetic neuropathy. There is a good market opportunity. There are the numbers, there are the reimbursement codes. There is a good case for the payers to pay this product. And eventually we've already de-risked. So we've already showed that this novel intraneural stimulation can do good for the patients. And now I'm happy to respond to questions.
Awesome. Wow. Fantastic. Every time we're listening to it, I say, wow, this is really game changer. David is absolutely right. And I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to connect. I believe that we can help you. One thing that I can say, probably we have one of the largest database of the gait metrics in people with peripheral neuropathy, with ulcer, without ulcer, as well as those who are wearing the offloading. The nice thing is that we collected all those data, and always I was looking to see that how we can leverage that data in a better way. And here we go. It seems that we have a great case use and love to actually collaborate and hopefully advance that field forward. I have actually a couple of questions or some questions that came to the chat, and I saw that Guy responded. Thank you. You mentioned that you can restore the feeling of touch. I was wondering that whether you can help to also perceive the level of the pressure, because this is what does matter for people with peripheral neuropathy, that often they don't perceive that whether they have the high pressure. For instance, they may have, I don't know, a callus form, and that could be unnoticed when they're walking on it. Is it something that is practical in the current version, or currently you are limited to detect the touch sensation?
Thanks for the question. That's very important. We are able to really modulate the intensity of the sensation that we deliver. This means that if the person is having a stimulus from the bottom of the foot, a mechanical stimulus, okay, so the pressure, as you're calling it, from the bottom of the foot of intensity 1, 2, or 3, we can give that type of information. As a matter of fact, we give an information that is proportional to the pressure sensors that are applied from the bottom of the foot. So this is not an on-off only device. This is really natural sensation restoration, including the intensity of the sensation that is being restored.
Okay, great. And another question, of course, is related to that one, that how about the feeling of sensation of temperature? Because again, this is another sensation is different than mechanical touch, like cold, heat, that many of our patients, they don't have it. And also, I have a follow-up question about my experience. I saw that you were in EPFL. I was at EPFL as well. And actually, when I was at EPFL, one of the earlier research that we did was with Medtronic for a spinal cord stimulation. It was earlier stage for reduction of neuropathic pain and lower extremity pain. I remember on that phase when we applied them, it was so sensitive to the posture of the individual. For instance, when they were in lying posture, the amount of the stimulation that they have, of course, that was continuous stimulation, it was too high for them, that creating the level of discomfort. I know that recently they adjust those issues. I don't know how to do it, maybe by adding some accelerometry to identify the posture of the individual. Do you have those kind of the sensitivities relevant to the posture of the individual, the type of activity that you're doing, and whether that modulation can be changes? It depends of the locomotion. For instance, walking might be you need to have a different modulation than when somebody is sitting or simply laying down on the bed.
I love this question. So you're right that the way they solve these in spinal cord stimulation is that they measure a little bit the walking activity, the posture of the person so that they can adjust the parameters of stimulation. We have in our implanted stimulator also an IMU so that we can really collect the information of the walking, of the posture of the person. Though we do a different use of it, and I'll explain why connected to your question. We use it to ensure that the person is walking with the insoles. What do I mean by that? Let's suppose that now the person is walking around, so the stimulator is detecting that, but the person is not using the shoes, so the insoles. So the person is deciding to not receive the sensory information. And so, leverage the therapy so that the ulceration does not occur. In that case, what we do is that we can signal this problem to the patient so that the patient is reminded to go wear a shoe. Because that's the only job that the patient needs to do once our product is implanted. They only need to wear the shoes. Okay? Now, we do not necessarily need this adjustment because in our case, the interfacing between the nerve and the electrode remains always the same. Why? Because we implant these microwires that I showed before with the addition of a cuff-like structure. This is a structure that is placed outside the nerve, which maintains the nerve always in the same shape. This means that the position between our microwires and the nerve is always the same. So our stimulation does not need to change during walking. And this we verify, this we've seen already in patients, that this does not happen indeed.
Okay, cool. Lastly, and then I'm going to the audience and also hopefully engage them. So for again, spinal cord stimulation and deep brain stimulation, of course, rely on the battery, but usually they implement the battery inside the body. So yours, where you place the battery, you are placing, it seems, on the thigh segment, and there is not much room to place any battery there. Is it batteryless or how it works?
Yeah, you're right. Now, there are surgeons, as a matter of fact, that eventually implant also the stimulator in the leg. Speaking with Giancarlo Barolat that I showed in the presentation, the neurosurgeon having implanted many stimulators, he eventually implants also in the leg the stimulators. Our idea, though, is when possible, because surgeons eventually change things on the table every once in a while. But our idea would be that the procedure is always the same, the procedure of implantation. So in our case, the battery would be placed where spinal cord stimulators are implanted today, which is the iliac crest, so the bottom part of the back. And then there is a connection through a cable between the electrode and the stimulator, the battery, in the two different locations where they're placed.
Okay, got it. Great. So, Michael, I saw that you have a couple of questions. You have always great ideas. So, did you want to elaborate on your comments and any other questions that you would like to add, or any other comments that you would like to add?
No, John, I honestly just looked at the patients in the video and recognized that this probably not my diabetic patients, and that's what triggered the question. So that was due to the trauma. I actually wonder if you think that the patients are going to respond the same way diabetic patients and the, I mean, amputation due to diabetes and amputation due to trauma. That's kind of, just a matter of curiosity. I also want to say that it's amazing that this type of experiments can only be done by physicians. I would never be brave enough to think, to think this way. And this deserves applause, of course. I mean, this is a breakthrough type of experiments. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
That's it. I mean, not that many of the comment, but you already clarified that those
Thank you very
traumatic
much.
patients.
No, eventually, let me explain. I said it during the presentation, but let me say it again. We were really the first ones trying this novel approach of implantation of electrodes inside the nerve. So we wanted the regulatory barriers to be low. And with amputees, eventually the regulatory barriers, unfortunately, are lower because in case there would have been, and it did not happen as I showed in the presentation, but in case there would have been some damage to the nerve, eventually that damage would have not necessarily reflected in consequences for the patients because the portion of the body that would have been innervated by the nerve is not there anymore, right? But what's important is that, and in diabetics and in amputees, we like to have the procedure that is always the same, meaning we implant in the mid-level of the thigh. In the mid-level of the thigh, the nerve, the morphology of the nerve, the structure of the nerve, the functionality of the nerve, it's all consistent. So we can do that approach on an amputee, on a diabetic, on a healthy person that would all respond in the same way because you're just implanting always the same portion of the nerve that is healthy.
Great. So, Francesco, I mean, and also Michael mentioned that currently the test that you have done on people with trauma, amputation due to trauma, rather than due to diabetes. When you're dealing with patients with diabetes, they're often frail and they have muscle atrophy. And of course, the gait patterns also is completely different. They have very poor propulsion phase on the pattern of the walking. But what do you think about the challenges? Do you think that some of those patients can tolerate that kind of a surgery? And what are the potential risk factors? And I'm sure that you are in dialogue with the FDA, what they ask you for actually adding the indication for peripheral neuropathy.
So we had some preliminary conversations with, well, clearly amputees before, and now also with a couple of patients with diabetic neuropathy and also a history of ulceration. Now, the feedback that we receive from the patient, and then I'm going to develop also on the feedback that we receive from the clinicians, from the physicians, the surgeons, the diabetologists, etc. The feedback that we received is, listen, what's the alternative? Today, if I develop an ulceration, I don't feel it. I'm inside this world where it's very complicated to do the prevention. There is this grave recurrence case. So better this than nothing. That is eventually the feedback. So these patients do not have an alternative. We need to give them an alternative. All right. And what we've seen from them is that they want an alternative. All right. The physicians have given us a similar feedback. Guys, yes, acknowledge the fact that there is a surgery, but eventually there is no solution as this one. There is nothing that can work to this level. So let's do it.
That's great. So I would like to challenge you on a different angle about the patient perception of benefit, because they may be different than what you're thinking as a scientist or even an engineer. Again, back the day when we have this spinal cord stimulation for pain management, actually there was a reimbursement code when I was starting working on it. And I remember that some of the patients that even they paid out of the pocket to do that procedure, it came that they were very upset. They said that, you know what, I'm still feeling pain. Of course, we monitor physical activity, and we saw that the physical activity of that person drastically has been improved. For instance, the duration of standing was increased by 400% compared to prior surgery. And then when we investigate and we interview patient, and we realize that, of course, this patient was old. That patient used to be painter. And in her mind is returning to the time when she was young and was able to stand 16 hours on her feet in the mountain and doing painting. So naturally, no matter what, actually that system cannot bring that kind of capability for the patient. So I'm imagining the same scenarios also in your case, that you're claiming that you are actually restoring the plantar sensation. And yes, there are great evidence that one of the highest predictor of foot ulcer is presence of neuropathy. And then you may say that, hey, if you are using that system, probably you may not develop another ulcer. And then they undergo that complex surgery and they will develop an ulcer because the might happening is it's not guaranteed that you can prevent ulcer. So in that case, how you provide a good argument to convince patient that, hey, despite that you have an ulcer, maybe it still is better than nothing.
Francesco,
Right.
if I can contribute to that for a second, I have a lot of diabetes in my family. So have, my grandmother, my mother, my sister, my aunts all have diabetes. So I'm very much aware of everything that you are talking about. And I think what we're trying to do here is close or narrow a very wide chasm or gap that there is today in the treatment available. Today, when a patient has an ulcer, that ulcer can be caught early, and the chances of remission or of treating it goes up significantly, as opposed to today's available solutions or today's awareness, let's say, of the patient results in a visit to the doctor very, very late, okay, maybe 10 months afterwards. And then that's catastrophic. And what we can do now with this telemonitoring, with this patient application, with this bringing of this situation in real time to the patient, we're narrowing that gap. And we're allowing the patient to now get the treatment in a timely manner that will save his foot eventually.
No, I fully appreciate that. Again, this is the part that we are all advocating for. It is devastating that every 20 seconds someone is losing a limb because diabetes, and we know that is preventable. And the best way of preventing is to restoring that sensation. But again, for perception of the benefit from point of view of the patient, when they have pain, they are doing whatever is needed to reduce the pain. So for neuropathic pain, if this is the case, is a no-brainer, and are searching for anything to relieve the pain. But for something that might be happening in the future, even though that we were saying that if you develop a foot ulcer, there is a likelihood to have another ulcer with 40% chance next year, and that eventually can end up with amputation. Yes, we can explain them, but they may say that, okay, the trade-off is a complex surgery, and that ulcer, it may happen, but my point is that sometimes we need to come up with a better, I don't know what would be the best pitch and what the best way to introduce that concept to convince them to undergo that kind of surgery.
So I think there's a matter of physicians.
Let me develop that.
As well. Sorry, Francesco.
Yeah, let me develop on that 1 second. Well, of course, when you start interfacing with the patient, you cannot say for sure 100% this will happen, right? I mean, there is an explanation of the risk, which is the same that is done with spinal cord stimulators today. Eventually, spinal cord stimulator providers do not say to their patient for sure, or eventually the surgeons that adopt them, they're not gonna say for sure your pain is gonna go down. There are good chances that the pain will go down, but expect that this may not happen, right? So that's the right information that you need to give to the patient. Additionally, I told you before, we've spoken seriously with a couple of patients, and the couple of patients really said, listen, if I need to think that I have a 40% chance of, because eventually we educated a little bit, if I need to think of a 40% chance of rehaving this, or a 5% chance, a 10% chance, and I need to take a surgery for that, better to take this surgery rather than having a 40% chance and then a 25% chance of going for an amputation later, right? I mean, a surgery is justified not necessarily thinking of the ulcer, but thinking of what happens if the ulcer develops wrong. Anyways, to being extremely precise, what we're doing right now, and I think the guy was about to mention it, but then I interrupted him. We're preparing a study with a university in Israel, where we've recently, a couple of days ago, submitted an ethical approval for extending a patient survey. So we're interviewing more than two. You may understand that interviewing patients is not that straightforward. So we went through the process, and eventually you gave me a good opportunity for adding one point to my slides, which is if there is an opportunity for also accessing additional patients so that not only we do a patient survey in Israel, but we do it also on American soil, United States soil, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. I'm very happy that you have planned to have it. For the last question, I would like to go to Dr. Klonov. He is the editor-in-chief of Diabetes Science and Technology, and he saw many technology, and he advising many companies for the technology to develop and focusing on diabetes. Dr. Klonov, thank you for being here. So you saw many of those technology. What kind of advices that you have, and what kind of obstacles do you think for deploy these technology in United States and for people with diabetes?
Well, this is very difficult once a person starts to go down the road of an ulcer. As an endocrinologist, we tell people, get your diabetes in the best possible control. Usually, people are not in the best possible control, so that will slow down the process. But one of the features I notice about diabetes, which is rather frustrating, is we usually know what the patient needs, but often the patient does not agree to that. For example, at UCSF Diabetes Clinic, I think it's the only clinic at UCSF when we have our conference where we don't discuss what's the best treatment. At many clinics, they have cases and discuss what's the best treatment. Diabetes clinic, we know the best treatment. However, what we discuss is how can we use psychology to get the patient to agree. So my one advice, if you're not doing this, is if the patient is not going for surgery and it's obvious they're going to have problems without the surgery, get them to a psychologist, find out what's really important for them. And it could be that with a psychologist, they'll come around and do the right thing.
Thank you. No, that's I completely agree with the feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Again, thank you so much. I know that it's this problem is talking forever, that we need, I mean, the beginning of the road is development of neuropathy for actually development of foot ulcer amputation. And if you can restore that, it makes sense. And it seems that you have very promising results. We'd love to partner with you and hopefully help you to bring the technology to address that unmet need. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you are joining from Italy. It's evening there. You're waiting to start your weekend. And thank you, everyone.
On a Friday, my wife still has not complained.
So happy Friday, everyone. Have a great weekend and see you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.